Why do people read crime novels? I've often wondered that because actually my wife reads a lot more crime novels than I do, and I sometimes wondered whether it was just the long result of being married to me. But then somebody pointed out that actually one of the reasons people like crime novels is not just because they want to wallow in all the evil wrongdoing and the complexity of the world of wickedness, but because crime novels get sorted out. By the end, somebody has found out who did it, and the world, in a sense, is put back right again. And that's what we all long for. It's a sign that actually deep within all human beings is a sense that something may be out of joint, and pretty certainly is, but that it ought to be sorted out. It ought to be put right. We want to be able to think it through. We want to be able to sort it out, to understand what's gone wrong and understand what it'll take to make things okay again. And it isn't just adults reading crime novels. You can see it at very early ages. When you watch children playing in a playground, they haven't had a lesson on justice, on fairness. They simply know that if somebody snatches something that somebody else has got, then that's not fair, or you shouldn't do that, whatever it may be. An innate sense of justice and fairness. And we see it in the world of sport, which in a sense, sport is a kind of a myth that we all have around the edge of our lives, where we want things to happen, to be sorted out for good people to win, for the best people to win. And if there's a sense that somebody is cheated, or that they were robbed of a win that they should have had because somebody else didn't play fair, it stirs up something deep within us. We don't just say, well, that's how the world is. We say, nope, that's not fair. It needs to be sorted out. We find it obviously in families, a deep sense of fairness and also tragically of unfairness. People often say, don't reckon you know somebody until you've divided an inheritance with them. And the moment when there's a generational transition in a family is often a very tense time. Who is going to get the best bed? Who is going to get the grandfather clock? Or much more than that, who is going to get a sizable inheritance or whatever it may be? And tragically, the sense of unfairness, of injustice that moments like that can produce sometimes produces lasting grudges. Sometimes families where two different bits of the family don't acknowledge one another, don't speak to one another for ages. And it's all because of this deep sense that we humans have, that things are out of joint and that that's not right and that they ought to be put right, that justice actually matters. Obviously, we can see this around the world, a sense of longing for justice and then a sense of puzzlement that we don't know how to do it. In the 20th century, there were great swirling movements, people seeking to put the world right this way or that. When we look at the causes of the First World War, it was because there were half a dozen different nations, not just Britain and Germany, as I grew up rather believing, but also France and Italy and Serbia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Poland and Russia, all telling themselves stories about age-old injustices which needed to be put right. Here was an opportunity, and so it was a perfect storm which went on for 4 horrible years. And then many other things that happened in the 20th century as well. Great social disruptions and unrests, huge general strikes, marches of people who felt that society had forgotten them, and it was a matter of injustice which had to be sorted out. And then, of course, all the horrors of the Second World War and the Holocaust, where different groups thought this is how to sort things out, this is how to put things right, only to discover later on that in all sorts of ways we made matters worse. Not least, of course, in the Middle East, where now the result of decisions taken after the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and then particularly after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East, where lines were drawn on a map by people sitting in offices in London or Paris or wherever, where we're going to call this country this, and we're going to call that country that, never mind the different tribes people who live there. A sense that we will put it right, we will sort it out. But then our blundering caused much larger and longer problems which are still going on. So out of all this, what do we conclude? That we all do have something we could call a passion for justice. We all know that there is such a thing as injustice and it needs to be put right. It's deeply built into the business of being human. And if we're not careful, it results in a world of grudges, of threats, of revenge, of victimhood, often doubled over as one person plays victim and so does something bad to the other person, and then they feel they've been victimized, and there's no easy way of settling these things. And we find this both internationally and locally. Our criminal justice systems, we try to do things to punish people on the one hand or to make them better on the other. We have big debates about what sort of justice we believe in. Do we believe in retributive justice, where people simply get what they deserve? Or do we believe in restorative justice, where the whole point is to try to put the community back together again? That's been tried in some parts of the world, particularly New Zealand, interestingly, based on the old Maori justice systems, where the point was that the community must be preserved and must not be allowed to be fractured. But it's difficult, it's complex. How do you do that on larger social scales? And what should we do about major international injustices? What should we do about the tensions that arise in different parts of the world? Is the United Nations just a strange organization whistling in the dark, pretending to help sort things out? Is the fact that we've got something that calls itself an international criminal court, is that actually good enough? Is that what we want as an international community? How do we know? What about the many places where the writ of the United Nations doesn't seem to run, so that the UN can say, we're going to do this, and other people say, no, actually we're going to do that, and there seems to be nothing that can be done about it? Is the world, in fact, both longing for justice and then pushing everybody else out of the way when they want to do one thing which is different from what we want? All of this results in a conclusion that we know justice matters, but puzzlingly, both locally in our own lives and all the way up to globally and internationally, we do not know how to do justice. We don't know what would make it happen. We don't know how to put things right. We have systems that can sort something out here and sort something out there, and maybe there are some trials in which people really do get properly convicted and properly punished, and everybody is relatively happy about it. But as we all know, across the board, things are much harder than we think they ought to be. And this is a puzzle at every level, not just a practical puzzle, what to do, but a puzzle about being human. How come we all know it matters, but we can't apparently all get together and make it happen? What's going on? What should we say about it? And here is the great irony, that for many in the Western world today, it is assumed that the church, the official representatives of Christianity, the church doesn't have much to say about this question which concerns us all so deeply, except perhaps that the church might be seen to be wringing its hands and saying, I wish you would all behave a bit better. Can't you all be nice to each other? So that many people, both in terms of national justice systems and international justice, they are thrashing around trying to make things happen, but nobody expects to be able to look at the Bible, to look at the Christian tradition, to look at the teaching of Jesus, to see that there might be new ways forward. In this course, we're going to be looking at several topics, of which justice is the first. And what we're going to do is we're going to think about the problem, which in this case is that we all know there is such a thing as justice, but we all know we're not very good at it. And then we're going to take a step back and read John's Gospel with that question in mind and see what might be emerging from John's way of telling the story of Jesus. And then we're going to take the risk of saying, okay, having glimpsed that, we're going to come back into our world and say, so what might be done now in order to try to bring resolution, both an intellectual resolution in terms of can we then understand what is actually going on, that we are these strange justice-longing for creatures, but we're thwarted all the time, and also practically what can actually be done, both by the churches and by people to whom the church can address an authoritative message from Jesus himself.